Hello, this is Elisabeth from Fior della Spada, a HEMA club in Vienna, Austria, who is concentrating on the Bolognese swordsmanship from the early 16th century. And today we are having another Bolognese basic video, and we are talking about thrusts today, as well as your first play from a historical source. So let's dive right into the action. When you are in your fencing stance and you want to perform a thrust, the basic rule is sword leads, body follows. So basically, first you try to get your sword into position and then your body follows, for example, by doing a step. You'll find countless other videos on how to perform thrusts correctly. I would recommend to take a look, for example, at some Rapier or Olympic fencing stuff, because if there's something they gotta be good at, it's gonna be thrusts, right? I'll put a link down into the description to a video by some Viennese colleagues who cover the thrust with a lunge according to Salvatore Fabris there. So if you want to take a look at that, it's a great video. But unlike in Rapier and later styles, the thrusts in the Bolognese style are not exclusively performed with a lunge. The thrusts in the sources are actually used with any type of footwork. You can do a lunge, obviously, so that would be our little aggresso, but the thrust is also used with the passos, or the passing step forward, but also backwards, and any other type of footwork. So that is one of the big differences you should focus on. Types of thrusts. Similar to the cuts that we covered in one of the other Bolognese Basics videos, there are different designations for the thrusts. There are two different approaches to this. You can either pick the designations depending on where the thrust is coming from, and then you have four possibilities. You have the thrust from above, from below, from the right, and from the left, obviously. And that would be, if the thrust comes from above, an imbroccata. If the thrust comes from below, it would be a stoccata. If you come from your left, it's a punta roversa, and if you come from your right, it's a punta dritta. But besides that, you can also distinguish the thrusts by the guards they are using. You can do a thrust either from a guard or into a guard. For example, a thrust from guardia di faccia, or a thrust into guardia d'entrare. With almost all of these thrusts, your sword or the blade of your sword must never be completely horizontal or vertical at the end of the movement. The only exception to that is the thrust from guardia di faccia, where your blade is horizontal. Next up, common mistakes. Depending on what I'm seeing with others, but mainly what I experienced myself, there are three common mistakes that I see a lot around, and I partially also do myself if I don't put attention to it. Something I see a lot around is weak knees. And the most common problem with people that live a Western lifestyle, most of them have knees that collapse inwards. If you do a lot of lunges, for example, or you should notice generally in your footwork that your knee has the tendency to constantly collapse inward, also outward, but that's not as common as inward nowadays. You should really go and see a physiotherapist or a personal coach to do some additional training to strengthen the muscles that help your knee to stay centered. This is something I've been struggling with for a long time, also because of my sports history. I am seeing a physiotherapist now and trying to do additional training to strengthen the muscles, to avoid long-term problems. Number two, you don't need to strike off. I think especially if you do a weapon that involves a lot of cutting, where you have to generate a lot of force, you have this habit of striking off. Now with thrusts, you don't need to do that, not at all. The sheer movement of striking off just gives away your intention to your opponent, so already a no-go. And the second one is you don't need force. The force generated by your body is enough. If you don't believe me, ask people who have done cutting tests or do a cutting test yourself. You will see that, especially with thrusts, you need a minimum of force to do damage. And the most interesting moments for me were when I talk to people that do cutting tests against animal remains, so something that is basically or is very similar to a human body, and they said that the thrust does need no force at all, and they even tried it with blunt swords and said that they still needed no force at all to really push the blade through, completely through the body. You don't need to strike off. And the last one that I already mentioned earlier, sword leads, body follows. Sounds easy, but depending on the footwork it can get a bit tricky. How to practice? The first obvious solo drill is to go and look for some kind of surface, like it could be a wall, but also a mat or a punching bag, and you try to practice your thrusts towards that wall or punching bag. And that helps you a lot to get used to the feeling of when the point of your blade touches the target and then you push through. You can also practice with others, for example trying to thrust through a ring that your partner, for example, holds in front of you or moves around in front of you. Another partner exercise that I like a lot is you buy yourself some punching pads, the same they use in boxing, and then you get the punching pads behind of your back, and every time you come up with the punching pad you have to thrust. And at first your partner can just stay there standing. You should be at a distance where you have to do at least one step to reach the punching pad. And if that's no problem at all, your partner can start moving around. And now I think we are ready for our first real historical play. This one is taken from Anonimo Bolognese, and since this is the video about thrusts, it involves thrusts, obviously. Welcome to your first Anonimo play. If you don't have a partner, you can also practice this against a wall or a fencing dummy. I've seen people attaching a sword to a dummy for similar exercises. That would suffice for the start. Important, start slowly, get faster later. If you practice with a partner, make sure that he is being cooperative at first. He can add more resistance later. But if you reach that point, don't forget that your partner knows exactly what is coming before you get frustrated. This play can definitely be used in sparring against an unwilling opponent if you set it up correctly. For the starting positions, you will need to know the guards. If you don't know them already, we got a video on that too, link here. Everything else we need should be covered within our Bolognese Basics series so far. Link to the playlist in the description. And here we go. Your partner starts in coda longa e stretta or porta di ferro e stretta, right foot in front. You can start at some distance in coda longa e stretta, also with your right foot in front. Close the distance with a passo and now throw a thrust a punta roversa to your opponent. The thrust doesn't necessarily need to hit, but you want your partner to feel threatened enough to either move backwards and or parrying by lifting his sword. Anonimo writes that now you do another passo to the right of your partner's sword, so a largo passo out of line. He writes that you can also pull your arm a little bit back to transition sides. You are basically doing what Rapier later would call a cavazione, so lowering the tip and bringing your sword to the other side of your partner's sword. Now, depending on the reaction of your partner and the height difference, it might be necessary to pass below or over his sword. If the play shouldn't work, that could be one possible reason. You then thrust towards his sword arm, your left foot follows, and in coda longa e stretta, and if necessary, withdraw further. In a variation of this play, Anonimo also suggests to do a mezzo mandritto, so a half blow from the right towards the opponent's sword arm instead of the thrust. He then says to end up in porta di ferro stretta. So that's your first Anonimo play. I hope you will have a lot of fun with that, and you should be ready to take on some other plays now as well. If you have further questions or suggestions for other basics videos, let me know in the comments. If not, this will probably be the last Bolognese Basics for a while. looking back on what we already produced and also looking at footage of myself, I realized more than ever that this is a journey, and I already see a lot of things that I wish I could have made better at that time for show material and stuff. So maybe in a few years I will reboot the series and hopefully then be better at what I do. If you want to follow us on this journey of getting better at Bolognese fencing, why not leave a like and subscribe? And besides that, I hope you have a lot of fun in training, and see you in the next video.